that I belong to that deals with meeting, 3 or 4 times a month, or, those fifth Thursdays, and what do you do with those, whether it's Lions or Rotary or anything else, there's always something in there, so. In regard to the consent agenda, I told Dave earlier today I could go either way. We've certainly I've always asked the staff to make sure and bring forth recommendations if there are things that we can do at the legislative and executive level that keeps them doing their work better and more consistently in the flow and that type of stuff in there. This is one, of course, I'm a good one for trying to get things off the desk as well, and not having things that kind of, we got it going, but we got to wait 2 weeks, and then we get it going, and something came up, we got to wait a week again, and just getting it done and getting it through there. It's not a matter of trying to rush through it, but when staff are on things, they certainly have more than one file on their desk.
Mm-hmm.
So I could go either way on that one. It certainly would. It could be simplified very much in that we are just flat noticing every meeting, which we do now anyway, whether it's a workshop or not, but it's noticed as a consent meeting and or a special meeting for the purposes of consent agenda, or if there's another item in there to be added to it. But, Jen?
I just thought of something as far as attendance and whether or not the workshops, if we added a consent agenda and voted, would they also be considered towards attendance? And would we also have to excuse our council members that aren't present so they wouldn't fall into the problem of unexcused absences?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. And I apologize, I forgot to mention that to effect the recommendation on having a regular meeting, albeit consent on second and fourth, it would require you to amend your code.
Mm-hmm.
Our code prescribes first and third. Workshops are only prescribed by rule. And then if you amend the code to provide for consent on second and fourth, then it wouldn't be a special meeting anymore. It'd be a regular meeting that you could notice regularly. But, right, it would be noticed, it'd be a regular meeting, and we would want to make sure that we excused council members that wouldn't be able to attend. It certainly, it provides more opportunities to do the city's business, but it also asks more of council members, I think. You're here, the idea was that you're here for the workshop anyway at 5:30, but there's a little bit more formality that's introduced into the whole thing, and one of the consequences is what you just mentioned.
Yeah,
So,
I'd have to rethink my support of it then at that point.
Well, Jennifer, would you just still agree then that if they're not excused, because that's all you have to do is just take attendance like they do now anyhow, and we would excuse and we move right on about it, and shouldn't take away that requirement. Because that three meeting rule came into place because we had some council members all over the years that just never called in, never showed up, never called in, and that's why we went back and found that. And it says it's 3 consecutive unexcused, and then they're removed from council.
I think that's RCW.
Is it?
So-
Well, okay, but we didn't have that prior to, and so we went back and looked at that and
Well,
put
it's
that.
just a matter of now there are 4 meetings a month that, the council members have to contend with as far as, not that we don't always want to be here every Monday, but I'm saying that if we're going to schedule a vacation or something like that, I, for one, am always trying to schedule them on, if I have to, on workshop weeks. So.
But those are easily excused, so.
They could be, yeah.
The scope of decision making
It's just
on
different.
consent might be lower.
Yeah.
We could try it, as Rod mentioned too. But I heard some consensus around general support for that. Certainly, when we get to the very last slide, I'll explain the process that you have to go through to change that. There'll be lots more opportunity to deliberate that particular piece, and I know I just threw that out just now, and I'm getting initial reactions. Chew it over and, think about it, and we'll do whatever's your pleasure.
I think we were looking to bring these back to the next council meeting. We were looking at bringing these back October 4th. Is that the
Right. I can, your own rules say that to amend your rules, it's almost like you're having a public hearing where you have to enter them into the record at one of your regular meetings, not take action, and then you take action at a subsequent regular meeting. And because you also, and I think, and that's what you've imposed upon yourselves. I think the intent of that was that so that just sort of all of a sudden at a meeting, the council wouldn't change its rules and no one had been given any notice of it, and then all of a sudden there's this vote. I think that makes sense if your rules are written or, so it's kind of like having set a hearing, do a hearing, and then just coincidentally, because you establish your regular meetings by code, we'd have to set a hearing and have a hearing on the ordinance as well. So you'd hear from the public, which I think would be helpful, what our constituents would think about you meeting on consent on second and fourth, and that public hearing would be an opportunity to hear about that.
If I can we back up just a minute to the general rules? On rule 1.3 on attendance and excused absences, that same question we were just talking about. One suggestion I might have, just to make it possibly easier for everybody and not to miss something, by the council's own rules, you're basically what you have to follow to be excused is to contact the city clerk. Not another council member, not myself, not yourself, but the city clerk. I'm almost wondering if we wouldn't possibly want to amend that to, members shall contact the mayor, city clerk, or their designees, because then that now gives you 4 options.
Right.
If somebody is
Sure.
gone or on vacation, my designee is automatically David. Jennifer's designee is automatically RJ as the deputy city clerk. So there's something in there that gives you a little bit more
That makes sense.
latitude than just one individual.
Yep, that's a good idea. We can certainly do that. I noticed there as well, just an editorial thing, it makes reference of a recorder. I don't really
Right.
have a recorder. I'm going to put clerk there. That's just kind of an editorial change. I notice here that you're actually supposed to vote on excusing.
We do.
And you
We do.
that, so
We do.
it's just good to be reminded that that's something that we do. It always happens, right? Okay. Thank you. The next slide takes us to section 3 of your rules, which basically is talking about the mayor's seat and kind of the responsibilities there. It's pretty straightforward. The mayor presides. In the absence of the mayor, there's a pro tem, of course. And in the absence of both the mayor and the pro tem, then the clerk would call a meeting to order, and then the council would select someone to chair the meeting from among its membership.
On that issue, though, is it chain of command, though, is mayor, mayor pro tem, and then public safety chair?
Right.
And that
I think
is
it is.
in a situation of having to not run meetings, but it is,
It's actually
Make
under
decisions.
ordinance called order of succession.
Right.
so would that mimic it on here as well, or is that not, we're not talking about the same thing?
No, because you could end up, the chair of that public safety could easily still be the mayor pro tem as well, which if they're not here, they're not here.
We could integrate that, though. I see your point.